Um, Jason, why don't we take over? Tell us what's going on here. We're going to talk about a new podcast called Land of the Giants.
Yeah, your brilliant name, apparently.
I know. I thought of the name of Land of the Giants. I don't remember thinking it up because I am a constant creative font of genius. So I'm not, but I am. So it's our first ever narrative product. It's a great name because I did coin it on Pivot, I think. It's basically a reference to the FANG companies, which is Facebook, Amazon, Apple,
Netflix
and Google.
Right.
And the power in their lives. So you're going to depict this over some seasons.
We are, yeah.
And so talk about it.
Sure. So the first season is called The Rise of Amazon. I've been covering Amazon for 6 years. Some of you may have heard me talking about this a bit yesterday. And you could really pick any of the tech giants to start with right now with everything going on. But for me, with 6 years into covering them, this felt like the exact right time.
Absolutely.
And so it's part historical. We're going to explain how they, accumulated the power they have today.
Which you've done. You did it.
I did an oral history of Amazon Prime that we published online.
Fascinating.
And then it's partly in the present day, talking to both Amazon and people affected by Amazon. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to look into the future a little bit too and predict, not in the way you and Scott do, but
well, he just makes things up.
He just makes shit up. But what happens next?
Right.
So we're going to hear a couple of clips today from a couple of different episodes from this series.
Okay, so it's a narrative podcast, different than the chat.
Yeah. So there will be interviews with people. Knitted throughout, but I went to Coffeyville, Kansas, where Amazon had one of their first warehouses.
Wow.
We'll get to one of those clips in a bit to figure out what the impact on real towns across America is. Amazon's much different than the other tech companies in that way. Mm-hmm. They have a physical presence in dozens, if not hundreds, of communities around the country.
Right.
But we're going to start with a clip from an episode that tries to answer the question, what does Amazon want from being inside our homes with Alexa? Like, what are they after?
Okay.
And I talked to an Amazon executive, and you get that point of view. But we also talked to a futurist named Amy Webb, who her job is to really connect all the dots and try to figure out what could happen. And in the first clip, she's talking about what some of you may have heard about. It's basically an Alexa microwave, right? Mm-hmm. Why would Amazon want to create a microwave connected to Alexa? So let's hear from Amy.
Why indeed?
So you order your microwave popcorn from Amazon. There's a fairly robust and rich data pipeline that leads up to that purchase. Once that box arrives in your home, however, or at your home, that data trail ends. That's why home automation has been a really interesting new area for companies like Amazon. Because, when you interact with a smart device that's connected within your home's ecosystem, that pipeline of data reopens. So going back to that popcorn for just a moment, Amazon has a microwave, Amazon Basics microwave, that is Alexa powered.
Crazy.
Alexa, pop my popcorn, and it will do just that. However, it's doing more than just popping your popcorn. It is sending commands back to the mothership, so you may have theoretically 5 bags of microwavable popcorn left. And perhaps when you're down to that final bag or just before you get to it, Amazon will either ask you if you want more popcorn, or maybe you'll have subscribed and new popcorn will magically show up at your home so that you never run out again.
So this sounds
That's both delicious and terrifying.
Yeah, so this actually, you can do this today already, right? Webb goes on to tell me, and that believes that we will have a world where our washing machines, our doorbells, obviously, even our countertops.
Amazon doorbells, his own Ring.
Yep, are connected not only to the internet, but to Alexa. And so we have these decisions being made for us. She envisions a world where if Amazon's getting its way into healthcare, maybe someday you're getting some type of healthcare product from Amazon, and they know what your caloric intake for the week should be. Mm-hmm. And it sounds crazy, but you go and say, Alexa, pop that popcorn, and Alexa says, sorry, not doing it. You've reached your limit. And I know, that sounds crazy to a lot of people.
Sounds a little good, too, but go ahead.
But but why not? And
Yeah.
I have a feeling you would like to have more decisions made for you.
I would have like all of them, but it is interesting what they could know, because like right now I make lists and I do it myself, and I actually resist a lot of my son goes around the house unplugging every Google and Amazon
Really?
device. Yeah, they're all unplugged in my house.
He's saying bad shit?
He just thinks they're spying on us, and he doesn't want them to spy on us. And he's convinced, the only ones he lets me leave on are the ones outside the front door, which would monitor people, it's just for burglaries,
Yeah.
essentially. And so otherwise, he doesn't want any cameras in the home. And both my children are like this, which is more interesting.
So we have a whole episode about Alexa
Great.
in the home. We also talk to Amazon executives, right? And so, part of Recode's thing is we've earned access to some of these people. And
Right.
so I spoke to Jeff Wilkie, who's basically the most important Jeff, not named Bezos at Amazon. He runs the whole consumer business. And
Been there forever.
he's been there since 90.
Similar to
Whatever.
Andy Jassy.
Yep, and he's built up the warehouse system. He now oversees all of retail. And we were talking about sort of Amazon, does Amazon celebrate success? So here's a clip of Jeff Wilkie.
We're spending most of our time thinking about customers. We say this, but it's true. We don't spend a lot of time on kind of victory laps, after any one particular success inside. We spend most of our time asking the question, how can we make customers' lives better? And what can we invent for customers? And there's still so much opportunity to invent. Technology is changing at a rapid pace. There's so much more invention and change ahead of us than behind us. It's way too early to spend time celebrating for too long.
So that,
If at all.
So that's very Amazon, right? And no celebrations whatsoever. And so that's clearly, they believe that and they
Yeah.
act that way. And so that's a big reason why they are where they are. But I think it's also why a lot of people are terrified of them.
Yeah.
Because they have 100 million plus Prime members. Like, that literally means nothing to them.
Right.
And so I think it's important to listen, be able to have on tape and be able to hear their words.
Right.
Because it tells you a lot about where they're going in the future, unless, they will, their ambition is sort of limitless.
Yeah, it's interesting.
You've covered them in the
Yeah, I
early
covered them in the
days.
very early days, the very, very early days when Jeff Bezos sought me out. He doesn't
What's
do that
changed,
anymore.
if anything, and how
Well,
they
you know
think
what?
about
It's
the world?
interesting when I think about that. When I listen to Jeff, one of the things that was interesting when Andy started to do some of the things around, we think this, we think that, and there are all these sort of business bromides that they have their own internally. And I was like,
Leadership principles.
Leadership principles,
Yes.
and they're very intimate. If you go to the wall of an Amazon warehouse, are peculiar ways. They have all this stuff, and it's. I find it odd and interesting at the same time. And they were like that before. They were like that. They were always sort of business school. Here's our bromides. Here's our rules. It was a little culty, but not culty. It was just close to being that way. And
It's nerdy.
It's
culty.
not nerdy culty. It's something else. There's something else going on there. I think it's because they were in Seattle, away from Silicon
Yeah.
Valley. It's got to be the most joyless group of people for their success. I don't know how to explain it, but I know all of them. And, whatever you think of Google, they're a fun group. I mean, they do crazy shit all the time. And they were fun to cover. They're odd, interesting, quirky. The Amazon people, I would say joyless. I don't know how else to put it. They didn't, celebrate their success. You didn't see any outward signs of, you spend time with Larry Ellison. He has a lot of fun with his crazy planes and his houses and his.
Bezos is having some fun these days.
He's having some fun these days.
Yeah.
Suddenly he's jacked up and he's fit and everything else, which he never was. He used to wear sort of these pleated khakis all the time that were just unfortunate on every level. And I never talk about people's clothes, but he was really preppy and very small and
I've seen the
slight,
photos.
stuff like that. And now he's sort of like Iron Man-y, and which I'm good for him. That's fine.
Yeah.
But he still doesn't do, even though he owns 90 houses now or something like that, it's not overt by these people. And the only person who ever was that way was Joy Covey, who left the company.
Yeah.
She was the CFO. I did a profile of her, and I found her I spent a lot of time with her after she left. She died.
Forgotten in a lot of ways
She is forgotten
from the narrative, and I'm hoping in one of the episodes about Amazon's history
You need to talk about it.
relationship with Wall Street.
Yeah.
And sort of how they sold Wall Street on this
Joy
long-term thinking. She was a huge.
Joy
she was a
Covey
huge-
legitimized Amazon. Everyone thought it was Amazon.bomb, and Joy legitimized it. She was one of the very few, very powerful female executives. She was a tough customer. She did extreme sports. One time she called me and she said, let's go surfing under the Golden Gate Bridge. And I was like, no, thank you, Joy.
Does she know who you are?
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
We became somewhat friends after she left. And she would always do extreme sports. And she unfortunately died bicycling in a really terrible accident, which is the last time I saw Jeff actually at her funeral. It's not, I'm not surprised by this quote from Jeff. They're just joyless. It is not in a negative, joyless way. They just aren't very, success doesn't interest them, but neither does failure. So when they do things like the phone or the things that don't work, they're also equally not bothered by it. Yeah. They're like Spock-like. They're Spock-like if I had to pick it.
And then in one episode, we wanted to examine Amazon's impact on local communities, like I was saying. They're very different from other tech companies in that regard, because they have real impact. They have to deal with all these
warehouses.
These
controversial too.
Yeah, and so I went and I spent a couple of days in that town called Coffeyville, Kansas. I had a great time, and I spoke to a few people who worked at Amazon warehouses for a long, long time. Here's one of them, Juanita.
So everybody goes into the big break room. They had all chairs set up, everybody sitting or standing, and they had the bigwigs talking, and they said, we're going to close this building as of January 31st. And, of course, a lot of people was upset. A lot of people started crying because some of them had just, had new babies, bought new homes, bought cars, and a lot of people asked them why. And all we could get mainly was because it wasn't close to a major airport. And, and because you're thinking it has to be more to it than that, because the building, we were successful over there.
And your first thought was what?
I was thinking, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
So the thinking, part of the thinking with this episode is that unlike the big titans of industry of yesteryear that went to a community and were there for decades and decades, Amazon's business needs change so quickly that they're going to be in and out of communities in 15 years, which sounds like a long time.
Right.
But for community,
no, they're efficiency oriented. They're the most efficient.
So Coffeyville was it was the third warehouse ever at Amazon. It was before Amazon Prime. It was cheap land, cheap labor, middle of the country. I also went in that episode to my hometown of Staten Island, New York, which is home to one of the newest warehouses, and talked to their political leaders about what they're hoping for.
Yeah.
And so, trying to get a sense of what is the lasting impact if they're moving in and out that quickly.
I visited one in Seattle, the most recent one, and it was both fascinating and wonderful in the way how efficient it was, and also you could start to see the future. And Amazon gets angry when I say this, but I could see no people in it. I just could, and they say, no, there's always going to be people who are going to hire more people. And they are hiring a lot of people. They are, and they're trying to move them up in jobs. But some of this factory work, you could just see automation just everywhere. And it was so innovative and interesting. Talk about a super innovative They were blowing labels onto boxes. They were sorting them. There was a guy putting stuff in a box. At one box, it was really interesting. There was a box of Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, condoms, a hairbrush, and like a bottle of shampoo. It was like, what does this person want? But it wasn't a person who was ordering anything. It was just, that's how they stored it. It was not an order. And then they had these little Kiva machines. It's the creepiest little thing, but wonderful, moving these boxes around. And I'm like, why is that going that way? Why is it going to? And so I think one of the things that I keep in mind, even though I do think they're going to be a great employer of a lot of people, one of the Congress people called me, and I went to visit them, I can say which one, and said, we've got an Amazon warehouse. It's going to employ this many people. I said, but for how long? And they're like, what? I was like, I don't know. I couldn't know. I could see these people are so interested in efficiency. And from the very earliest days when Jeff showed me his first warehouses, which were organized, books were here, shampoo was here, whatever they were, it was mostly books.
And DVDs.
DVDs and books. Yep. It was, people had roller skates down the aisles, if I remember. It was just a small warehouse in Seattle near the airport. Yep. And, he packed and picked and packed and stuff like that, so we had a sense of it. Where it's come from when he did that, and of course we all fell for it, and like Jeff Bezos is in his, we did those dumb stories, which we shouldn't have fallen for, but we did. What it's become from what it was and where it's going is going to be astonishing, the way they move around products.
And lucky for you, we have a whole episode
Good.
about the race for a lights out warehouse with no humans and what that means.
Or a few humans that will run the whatever.
6 well-paid
And the
humans.
question is, should people be doing packing? Like, one of the things that was interesting in this warehouse is you know how you get a box? They have the exact box that knows exactly the size box. The computer tells the people what box, and then they only give them so much packing stuff to put in it, and they know exactly how much. And the whole thing was just, I was in awe of Jeff Bezos. I thought what an astonishing accomplishment, and what a terrifying accomplishment it is.
I think that's a good way to sum it up.
Yeah.
So you can subscribe to Land of the Giants right now, Apple, your favorite podcast app. First episode will launch in July. It'll be 7 episodes through August.
And then you're moving on to Google.
Well, someone is. We'll decide who that is.
All right, I got some stories for you.
But there will be future seasons about the other 4 tech giants, and I think it's going to be fascinating. So I hope you all subscribe.
All right, thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Jason's amazing. Jason's amazing.